All right, welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're looking into something that sounds, well, a little too good to be true.
Yeah.
$5,000 checks for some Georgians.
Right.
All because of government savings. And something called a DOGE dividend.
We got it.
Color me intrigued. We've got excerpts from an article here. It's called Trump Administration's Proposed DOGE Savings Distribution, to help us break it all down.
Right.
Let's see what's actually going on here.
Yeah, it's certainly attention-grabbing.
Right.
I mean, the basic idea is that the government finds some savings.
Yeah.
And specifically through this DOGE initiative.
Okay, hold on. Before we even get to the dividend part, you said DOGE. What is that?
Oh, right, yeah. So DOGE stands for the Department of Government Efficiency.
Okay.
It's basically a rebranding of the U.S. Digital Service, which President Trump put into place with an executive order.
Gotcha.
And officially, it's called the U.S. DOGE Service Temporary Organization.
Temporary organization.
Yeah.
That makes it sound like this whole thing could just, like, disappear as quickly as it showed up.
It's a good point. And to make things even more interesting, Elon Musk is involved.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's officially a special government employee for DOGE. And Trump has even called him the leader of it at one point.
Wait, so Elon Musk and, like, government efficiency?
Yeah.
That's not a combo I would predicted. But
No.
if it's a temporary thing, who's actually running it right now?
Well, currently the acting DOGE administrator is Amy Gleason.
Okay.
So, yeah, the leadership situation is a little unclear.
Okay, so I've got this DOGE thing, maybe temporary. Musk is kind of floating around it. How did this whole give money back to taxpayers thing even come about?
So the idea was first put out there by James Fishback.
Okay.
He's the CEO of a company called Azoria.
Gotcha.
And he went on, X, what used to be Twitter,
Okay.
and suggested that any savings DOGE finds, some of it should go right back to the people. He called it the DOGE dividend.
And this got Musk and Trump's attention.
It did. Yeah, Musk replied saying he'd check with the president.
Wow.
And a little while later, Trump himself publicly mentioned the idea.
No way.
Yeah, he even suggested giving 20% to citizens and another 20% to pay down the national debt.
Is that where that $5,000 figure for Georgians is coming from?
Yeah.
Is that actually possible?
Wow.
Or is that just hype?
That's where things get a little tricky.
Okay.
To get to $5,000 per person, DOGE would need to find like $2 trillion in savings.
Wow.
Even Musk himself has said that that might not be realistic.
Yeah.
Plus, any dividend would have to be approved by Congress.
Right.
So that's another hurdle.
So a lot of ifs already.
Yeah.
But even more importantly, can DOGE actually find these huge savings they keep talking about?
A good question.
That's what I'm really curious about.
Yeah, you're right to be curious. The article we're looking at mentions that DOGE has actually gotten some criticism for announcing these big cuts that don't always hold up when people take a closer look.
So it's not just like typical political back and forth.
Not really, no. There are concerns from both sides.
Interesting.
Yeah, Nat Malkus, who's a researcher at the American Enterprise Institute,
Okay.
put it this way. He said, DOGE has an unprecedented opportunity to cut waste and bloat. However, the sloppy work shown so far should give pause to even its most sympathetic defenders.
Oof, that's a pretty harsh assessment.
Yeah.
What kind of sloppy work are we talking about here?
Well, there have been times where they inflated the savings and then had to backtrack.
Okay.
Like, there was this accounting error where $8 million in savings became $8 billion.
Whoops.
Yeah, bit of a difference there.
Yeah, just a little bit.
And some canceled contracts and leases that they initially counted as savings turned out to be inaccurate.
So they might be overstating how much they're saving.
It's possible.
That's a little worrying, especially if this whole dividend thing depends on those numbers being right.
Exactly. And remember that wall of receipts DOGE keeps bringing up.
Yeah.
Well, some of those receipts seem to be changing.
Oh, this is getting good. Like those receipts you find in your pocket weeks later and have no idea what they're for.
Exactly. Like, for example, they claimed big savings from canceled research contracts at the Education Department.
Okay.
Musk initially said it was $881 million, but later DOGE adjusted that to $489 million. And independent analysis suggests the real savings was more like $278 million.
That's a huge difference.
It is.
It sounds like we need to do some digging into those receipts, see what's really happening with these DOGE savings.
I agree.
But before we do that, let's shift gears a bit.
Guys.
Let's say, just for the sake of argument, that DOGE does find all these savings. Who actually gets a piece of this dividend?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. You know, James Fishback, the guy who came up with this whole idea,
Yeah.
He thinks that the dividend should only go to households above a certain income level, the ones who pay federal income taxes.
So people with lower incomes would be excluded.
That's right.
What's the thinking behind that?
He argues it's about encouraging people to save money, not spend it.
Hmm.
He compares it to the COVID-19 stimulus checks,
Right.
which he thinks lower-income households mostly just spent instead of saving.
That's a pretty bold statement, but let's bring this back to Georgia for a second. What would this mean for people living there?
So about 14% of Georgians live in poverty.
Okay.
The median household income is around $74,000.
Okay.
But the average income per person is even lower, around $39,000.
Right.
And according to the Pew Research Center, people making under $30,000 don't really pay any federal income tax.
So if we're going by Fishback's idea,
Yeah,
a lot of Georgians wouldn't even qualify for this DOGE dividend.
that's right.
That raises some questions about who actually benefits from these supposed government savings.
It does.
This is getting pretty complex. We've got questions about whether DOGE is really saving as much as they say they are. We've got potential bias in who gets the dividend.
Right. What it all means for different income groups.
Exactly. And that takes us right to the heart of this deep dive. Could this proposal actually make the gap between the wealthy and those struggling to get by even bigger?
Yeah.
And what could the long-term effects of this policy be?
Those are some big questions.
They are.
But I think our listeners are up for it. You think so?
I think so too.
Let's keep going then. All right, so we've kind of laid out that this DOGE dividend has the potential to, really change things.
Yeah.
But also comes with some big questions.
For sure.
What I'm really curious about is, if this thing actually happens, what could it mean for people, at different income levels?
Yeah. That's a really important question.
Right.
As we talked about, Fishback's proposal really zeroes in on those higher income households.
Right.
And if a lot of people are excluded from getting the dividend, it could create a situation where, well, the rich just get richer.
It's like giving a bigger slice of cake to the people who already have plenty.
And the people who are actually hungry get even less.
That's a perfect analogy.
Right.
And it brings up, concerns about fairness.
Right.
Making sure the benefits are spread out evenly.
Yeah.
Remember we were talking about the average income in Georgia being around $39,000?
Yeah.
If you're a Georgian earning that much, you might be totally left out of this dividend.
That just doesn't seem right.
Right.
And what about that whole thing about the dividend encouraging saving instead of spending?
Yeah.
Does that actually make sense?
It's not so straightforward. I mean, it's true that higher income households tend to save more,
Right.
but it's not a guarantee.
Right.
Economics is complicated. There are lots of things that influence how people spend and save.
So we can't just assume that giving more money to people with higher incomes will magically boost savings.
Yeah.
And, economic growth.
Yeah, it's kind of a simplistic answer to a really complex problem.
Right.
And we need to think about the possible downsides, too.
I'm like,
Well, what if all this extra money for higher earners just makes inflation worse?
oh, yeah.
Could it create asset bubbles
Hmm.
or make inequality in housing even worse?
That's a good point.
It's like trying to fix a leaky faucet by turning the water pressure up even higher.
Yeah.
You're not solving the problem, you might be making it worse.
Right. Exactly.
And we can't forget about the political side of things either.
Oh, of course not.
This whole proposal could be seen as a political move, to try and appeal to a specific group of voters,
Yeah.
maybe even at the expense of others.
It's like a chess move trying to win over certain voters
Right?
without thinking about the bigger impact on everyone else.
Yeah, we really have to think critically about why these policies are being proposed and how they might affect different parts of society.
We do. We can't just accept these proposals as they are.
Yeah.
We need to, dig deeper.
Right.
Look
Yeah.
at the evidence.
Absolutely.
And think about all sides.
Exactly. So what questions should we be asking as we think about this DOGE dividend and how it might affect things?
Well, that's a great question.
All right, well, here are a few things to consider.
Right.
First, is that $2 trillion in savings even realistic?
Right.
Or is it based on, made-up numbers and shady accounting?
Yeah, good question.
Second, is it even ethical to exclude lower-income households from the dividend? And finally, what are the long-term economic effects going to be?
Right.
Will it actually lead to growth and prosperity?
Yeah.
Or could it make existing inequalities worse and lead to consequences we don't even see coming?
Those are all excellent questions.
Yeah.
And it seems like we need more information, more transparency from the Trump administration to really answer them.
Absolutely.
This feels like a puzzle where some of the pieces are missing.
It does. Yeah.
We need to know more.
I agree. We need a thorough and independent audit of the savings that DOGE is claiming.
Yeah.
We need a clear explanation of who's eligible for the dividend.
Right.
And we need a full analysis of the possible economic and social effects.
Transparency and accountability are key here.
They are.
Without those, this DOGE dividend could just become a political football.
Yeah.
With different groups fighting over their share and ignoring the big picture.
And that brings us back to why critical thinking is so important.
Yeah.
And making informed decisions.
Right.
We can't just rely on sound bites and political speeches.
No.
We need to really think things through, consider different points of view, and demand policies that are based on evidence.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion.
Yeah.
Each layer reveals more and more complexity.
Exactly.
And it's our job as informed citizens to keep digging, keep asking questions, and hold our leaders accountable.
Well said.
This DOGE dividend debate is a perfect example of the challenges we face as a society.
It is.
It highlights, the importance of economic justice, making sure resources are distributed fairly,
Yeah.
and the need for policies that help everyone, not just a select few.
Exactly.
This whole conversation has been really eye-opening. We started with what is DOGE,
Right.
and now we're dissecting a potentially massive policy shift with serious consequences.
Yeah.
I think we've covered a lot of ground.
We have. Yeah, we've explored how the DOGE initiative came to be. We've looked at the proposed dividend. We've taken a close look at those claimed savings, and we've analyzed how it might impact different income groups.
And, most importantly, we've asked some important questions about fairness, transparency,
Absolutely.
and the possibility that things could turn out differently than intended.
Right. This is a complicated issue with far-reaching consequences, but I think we've given our listeners the knowledge and tools they need to have informed discussions and form their own opinions.
That's what it's all about.
It is.
Now, I want to hear from our listeners. What are your thoughts on this whole DOGE dividend thing? What stands out to you? We want to hear your insights.
Yeah, share them with others.
Right. Keep the conversation going.
Remember, knowledge is power.
That's right.
And when we share what we know and our different perspectives, we create a more informed and engaged society.
So true. Now, before we wrap up, let's leave our listeners with one final thought to ponder.
Okay, imagine this.
Sure.
The DOGE dividend actually happens,
Right.
but instead of just going to higher income households,
Yeah.
it's used to fund something like universal basic income
Oh, wow.
or invest in education and infrastructure. How would that change things?
Yeah. What would that do to our economy and society?
Right.
That's a really interesting question. It makes us think beyond the immediate impact and consider other ways of doing things that could benefit a wider range of people.
Exactly. And it reminds us that we have the power to create our own future.
Right.
By having constructive conversations, demanding accountability from our leaders, and fighting for policies that promote equality and justice, we can create a society that's more prosperous and inclusive for everyone.
Very well said. This deep dive has been a wild ride. And I think we've all learned a lot, but it's not over yet. We've got one more part to this episode.
We do.
Where we'll explore some even bigger questions and the potential long-term consequences.
It's going to be good.
Stay with us.
And we're back for the last part of our deep dive into this DOGE dividend. And, as we've been talking about this, I've realized it's more than just a potential check in the mail. It kind of ties into some big ideas about how our economy works.
Right.
And what the government's role is in all of that.
You're absolutely right. This proposal, even if it doesn't actually happen, it starts a conversation about some really important economic concepts.
Okay.
Like the idea of taking government savings and giving it right back to the people.
Yeah.
That's similar to talks around universal basic income and other ways of redistributing wealth.
It's almost like a giant experiment, happening in real time.
Right.
If this DOGE dividend actually happens, we could see how giving people cash directly changes their behavior.
Yeah. What they spend it on.
Totally.
And if it really does help the economy overall.
Think of the data we could get.
I know, right?
We can see how people use the money. Do they save it, invest it, spend it immediately, and what kind of ripple effects that has across different industries and for people at different income levels.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It could change how we think about economic stimulus measures.
Yeah, data nerd heaven over here. But, it's not just about the economics of it all. There's the social and political side, too.
Oh, absolutely.
This proposal kind of taps into people's worries about economic inequality.
Yeah.
The role of government. and what we even mean by fairness in society.
It makes us ask those big questions,
Right.
like who deserves help, what kind of help is actually best,
Yeah.
and how do we balance personal responsibility with the well-being of everyone?
Those are tough questions.
They are.
And there's no easy answers there.
No one-size-fits-all solution.
Yeah, it reminds me that economic policy isn't just numbers on a spreadsheet.
Right.
It's about people,
Right.
their lives, their hopes, their struggles.
Exactly.
And any decision, especially one as big as this DOGE dividend, it needs to be made with empathy,
Yeah.
understanding the real impact it could have on people's lives.
You need to get past all the political fighting and ideology
Right.
and really talk about how to create an economy that benefits everyone, not just a select few.
Yeah.
This DOGE dividend debate, even with all the controversy, could be what gets that conversation started.
So as we're wrapping up this deep dive, I don't want our listeners to just walk away thinking, is this DOGE dividend good or bad?
Right.
Let's use this as a starting point to talk about the bigger things.
Yeah.
Economic justice, social responsibility, the kind of future we want.
Absolutely. Talk to people in your community,
Yeah.
have those tough conversations, and tell your elected officials to create policies that are fair, give everyone a chance,
Yeah.
and lead to a better life. For all of us, the future isn't set in stone. It's shaped by the choices we're making right now.
That's a great point. And to our listeners, remember, knowledge is power.
It is.
The more informed we are, the better decisions we can make. So keep learning, keep questioning, and keep exploring. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks, everyone.